All right, welcome. Today, we're going to break down a really cool concept in reinforcement learning called Sarsa. You can kind of think of it as teaching an AI how to learn on the job, just one single step at a time. So let's kick things off with the big why. Why does Sarsa even exist? Well, imagine you've got an AI in a maze. The catch? It has no map. All it can do is take a step and see what happens. So the question is, how on earth does it figure out the best path? Just by learning from its mistakes, one move at a time. That's the puzzle Sarsa helps us solve. This really gets at the core of what we call the agent's dilemma. Basically, it's like being dropped into a game with a high score to beat, but absolutely no instruction manual.
And, it's even trickier than that. The agent is facing a few major hurdles. For starters, it's model-free, which is just a fancy way of saying it has no map. It doesn't know the rules of the world. Then there's the whole delayed reward thing. A great move now might not pay off until way later. And of course, it's always got that classic problem. Should I stick with what I know works, exploit, or try something new that might be way better, explore? So it has to learn in this really uncertain environment, and that is exactly where an algorithm like Sarsa comes into play.
Okay, so how do we wrap our heads around this? Let's use a super simple analogy that I think will make this all click. We're going to talk about a lost tourist. So picture this. You're the tourist, dropped into a city you've never seen before. No Google Maps, nothing. The city itself, that's the environment. And your goal is simple, just have the best day ever. You want to maximize your enjoyment, which in our world is just the reward.
Now, how do you decide where to go? You probably come up with some kind of personal rule of thumb, right? Maybe it's follow the crowds or turn left at interesting-looking cafes. That's your policy. And here's a really, really important point. Sarsa is what we call an on-policy algorithm. All that means is that our tourist learns based on the decisions they're actually making. They're learning about their own strategy, in real time as they use it. They learn from the path they are literally walking on.
Okay, so as you're wandering around, you start to get these gut feelings. From this corner, turning right seems like a good idea. In reinforcement learning, we call that feeling an action value, or sometimes a cue value. It's basically a score you're keeping in your head for taking a certain action from a certain spot. Think of it like a little mental note. Turning left here, that feels like an 8 out of 10 move.
Right, so how do you actually update those gut feelings? Well, the secret is hiding in plain sight, right in the name. Sarsa isn't just some made-up word. It's actually an acronym that spells out the 5 things you need to learn from any single step you take. This little 5-part sequence is the heart of it all. State, action, reward, next state, and next action. This is the complete experience that the Sarsa agent learns from. So let's break it down step by step using our lost tourist.
First up, the first S stands for state. Easy enough, right? This is just where you are, right now. For our tourist, they're at the corner of Main and Oak. That's their state.
Okay, next comes A for action. You can't just stand there, so you have to do something. Following their policy, their little rule of thumb, our tourist decides to walk north. That's their action. And now the fun part. R is for reward. What happens after you take that action? Well, in this case, boom, they discover an amazing park. That gives them a big boost of enjoyment. Let's say plus 15 points. That's their immediate reward.
Which brings us to the second S, the next state. Naturally, after walking for a bit, you're not in the same spot anymore. You've arrived at a new intersection, Main and Pine. That's your new state.
And finally, we get to the second A, the next action. And listen up, because this is the real secret sauce of Sarsa. From your new spot, you look around, and, using your policy, you decide what you're going to do next. Let's say your policy tells you to turn east. Sarsa needs to know what you're planning to do from this new state.
Okay, so now we have all 5 pieces of our puzzle. S-A-R-S-A. The magic is in how they all come together to let you learn. You don't wait till the end of the day to review your choices. You update your gut feelings right there on the spot.
It all boils down to this super intuitive idea, which has a kind of fancy name, Temporal-Difference learning, or TD learning. But don't let the name scare you. All it means is that you learn by comparing your expectation to the new reality. You see how wrong you were, and you make a little adjustment to your belief. That's it. You're learning from the difference between what you thought would happen and what really did.
Okay, but here's the really clever part. What exactly is the new reality for Sarsa? Your expectation was just your old gut feeling about walking north. Simple enough, but the reality, it's not just the plus 15 points from finding the park. It's the reward from the park
plus the gut feeling you have for that next planned move, turning east. It's a bit weird, right? You're updating a guess based on another guess. This is a technique called bootstrapping, and it's what lets Sarsa learn so quickly.
So let's trace that full loop one more time. You're at a spot, you take an action, you get a reward, and end up in a new spot. From there, you figure out your next action. And you use the value of that planned next action to go back and update your opinion of the first action. See? You're learning about how good your own quirky strategy is because the whole calculation depends on what you are actually planning to do next.
All right, we've gone through a lot here, so if there's just one thing you remember about Sarsa, let it be this.
Because of how it learns, Sarsa is what you might call a realistic algorithm. It's a little bit cautious. It's learning the true value of its current policy, including all its weird habits and mistakes. It isn't dreaming about some perfect, optimal path. It's focused on figuring out how good the path it's actually walking is, right now. And that, of course, leads to a really interesting question. What if our tourists could learn about the absolute best path through the city, even while they themselves are still wandering around and making mistakes? What if they could learn from a hypothetical perfect strategy instead of just their own? Well, that's a whole other style of learning called off-policy learning, and it's something we'll definitely dive into next time.